Part 1. The Candy Appears. Halloween in Willow Creek was always a lively affair. Streets lined with orange and purple lights, homes decked out with carved pumpkins, and children in their best costumes roaming door to door in search of candy. But this year, something felt different. There was an unsettling chill in the air that no one could quite explain. Perhaps it was the unusually dark sky or the odd wind that seemed to whisper through the trees, but no one could shake the feeling that this Halloween would be unlike any other. Lily Parker was one of the many children excited for the night. She had been planning her costume for weeks, a vampire, complete with fangs and a red velvet cloak. Her parents were out of town, leaving her older brother Jake to watch over her. He wasn't thrilled about missing a Halloween party, but he was a good brother and took her trick-or-treating anyway. They wandered the neighborhood, hitting the familiar houses with decorated yards and welcoming porch lights. By the time the night was winding down, Lily's bag was heavy with candy. But as they neared the end of the street, she noticed a house she hadn't seen before. It was dark, no decorations, and the windows were all drawn shut. It looked abandoned, yet there was something about it that pulled her in. "Let's skip it," Jake suggested, but Lily, curious, insisted on knocking. Knock, knock. For a moment, there was nothing but the faint sound of the wind rustling the leaves. Then the door creaked open, ever so slightly, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. A gloved hand emerged, holding a single piece of candy, wrapped in silver foil with no markings. Lily hesitated, but something compelled her to take it. She thanked the shadowy figure and quickly backed away, her heart racing for reasons she couldn't explain. Jake had already turned and was walking down the path, urging her to hurry. As they returned home, Jake joked about the creepy house and how she should just throw that candy away. "Probably expired," he laughed. But Lily didn't throw it away. That night, after Jake went to bed, she pulled out the strange silver-wrapped candy and stared at it under the dim glow of her bedside lamp. She peeled back the foil, revealing a round piece of dark, rich chocolate. It smelled sweet and inviting. She popped it into her mouth. The taste was strange, sweet at first, but with a bitter aftertaste that made her wince. She swallowed, thinking nothing more of it as she climbed into bed, ready to drift into the usual sleep that followed a long night of Halloween excitement. But sleep didn't come easily. As soon as Lily closed her eyes, her dreams twisted into something dark. She found herself standing in a fog-drenched forest. Shadows darted between the trees, and a distant voice whispered her name.
"Lily, come closer."
Her heart raced as she wandered through the mist. The ground was wet, her bare feet sinking into the cold mud. Shapes moved at the edge of her vision, too fast to focus on, too terrifying to acknowledge. And then she saw it, a figure standing still, watching her from the distance. Its face was hidden in the darkness, but she could feel its eyes on her.
"Lily, come closer."
She wanted to run, to wake up, but her feet wouldn't move. The figure began to approach, slow at first, then faster. She could hear the wet thud of its footsteps in the mud, the snapping of branches as it neared. She screamed, but no sound came out. The figure reached her, its breath cold against her neck, its whisper chilling her to the bone.
"You shouldn't have eaten it."
Lily jerked awake, gasping for breath. Her sheets were damp with sweat, her heart racing. She glanced at her clock, 3:15 a.m. She sat up, rubbing her face. "It was just a nightmare," she whispered to herself. "Just a stupid nightmare." But as she pulled back her sheets to get up, she froze. Her feet were covered in mud. Part 2. The nightmares spread. The next morning, Lily could barely keep her eyes open. Her body ached with exhaustion, and she couldn't shake the vivid images of her nightmare. She had scrubbed her feet clean, but the memory of the mud clinging to her skin left a lingering sense of dread. She thought about telling Jake, but she knew he would brush it off. Just a bad dream, he'd say. So she kept quiet, hoping that it really was nothing more than her imagination. At school, however, things felt off. Lily wasn't the only one who looked exhausted. Several of her classmates seemed just as worn out, their eyes heavy with fatigue. During recess, she overheard a group of kids whispering about strange dreams they had. "I was in this field, and there was this thing," one boy said, shivering. "It chased me, and I couldn't wake up. It felt so real." Lily's heart raced. She wasn't alone. As the day dragged on, she couldn't help but notice more and more of her friends and classmates acting strangely. Some were quieter than usual, their faces pale. Others had visible bruises or scratches they couldn't explain. By lunchtime, rumors were spreading like wildfire about the Halloween candy causing nightmares. It wasn't just the kids. Even the teachers looked concerned, their whispers hushed but urgent. The janitor was called in to clean up a mess after a student had woken up screaming in the middle of class, swearing that he'd been attacked by something in his dream. Lily's best friend, Sarah, was unusually quiet during lunch. Normally, Sarah was full of energy, chatting about the latest YouTube videos or her newest obsession. But today, she just picked at her food, her hands trembling slightly. "Did you have a weird dream last night?" Lily asked cautiously. Sarah looked up, her eyes wide. "You too?" Lily nodded, a sinking feeling in her stomach. "What happened?" Sarah hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "I was in this old, broken-down house. It was dark, and I could hear this scratching sound coming from the walls. There was this figure in the corner, watching me, but every time I looked, it was gone." Lily felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "Did it say anything?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Yeah," it said. "You shouldn't have eaten it." Lily's heart pounded. "What? What did you eat?" Sarah pulled something from her pocket, a piece of silver-wrapped candy, identical to the one Lily had eaten the night before. "That," Sarah said quietly. "I got it last night while trick-or-treating." Lily stared at the candy, her blood running cold. "Where did you get it?" Sarah frowned. "I don't know. Some weird house at the end of the street. I didn't even see who gave it to me. It just appeared in my bag." Lily felt sick. She wanted to tell Sarah everything, about her own nightmare, about the mud on her feet, but she didn't know where to start. Instead, she stayed silent, her mind racing with questions. That night, after she and Jake had gone to bed, Lily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The fear was palpable, and every sound in the house made her jump. And then, just as she started to drift off, she heard it again. A whisper.
"Lily, come closer."
She bolted upright in bed, her heart pounding. Her bedroom was dark, but something was wrong. The air felt heavy, and the faint scent of damp earth filled the room. Lily slowly turned her head toward the window. Standing outside, just beyond the glass, was the figure from her dream. Its face was still hidden in shadow, but its eyes, glowing faintly in the moonlight, were fixed on her. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The figure raised a hand, its bony fingers tapping against the window. Lily squeezed her eyes shut, willing it to go away. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But when she opened her eyes, the figure was gone. The only thing left was the sound of her racing heartbeat. Part 3. The marks appear. Lily barely made it through the next day. The nightmares were getting worse, and now she wasn't even sure if she was awake or still dreaming. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the figure. It followed her, whispering her name, watching her from the shadows. At school, things were spiraling out of control. More kids were showing up with strange marks, scratches, bruises, cuts, each one claiming they'd been attacked in their dreams. Some had even been taken to the hospital after waking up screaming, unable to explain the wounds on their bodies. The teachers tried to keep things calm, but panic was spreading fast. Parents were called in to take their kids home early, and the school was on high alert. No one could explain what was happening, but everyone knew it had something to do with the candy. Lily's friend Sarah was no exception. When Lily saw her that morning, her arm was covered in long, thin scratches. "I don't remember how it happened," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "I just woke up, and they were there." Lily didn't know what to say. She had her own marks now too, faint bruises around her ankles, as if something had grabbed her in her sleep. She hadn't told anyone, not even Jake, but she knew it was only a matter of time before things got worse. After school, Lily and Sarah sat together on the playground, talking in hushed voices. "What do we do?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't want to sleep anymore. I don't want to dream." Lily felt the same way. The thought of going to sleep, of being pulled back into that dark forest or facing the figure at her window, made her stomach twist with dread. "We have to figure out where the candy came from," Lily said, her voice shaking. "Maybe if we find out who gave it to us, we can stop this." Sarah nodded, but she looked doubtful. "But how? I don't even remember where I got it. It just showed up in my bag." Lily thought back to the night before, to the dark house and the gloved hand that had given her the candy. "I think I know where to start." That evening, after Jake had gone out with his friends, Lily grabbed a flashlight and met up with Sarah. Together, they made their way to the edge of the neighborhood, to the street where Lily had received the cursed candy. The house looked even more foreboding than she remembered. Dark, silent, and seemingly abandoned. No decorations, no lights. Just a crumbling, old house that didn't belong. Lily hesitated at the gate, her heart pounding in her chest. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah whispered. Lily swallowed hard. "We have to know." They walked up the creaky steps and stopped in front of the door. Lily raised her hand, about to knock, but then something caught her eye. There on the porch was a small, silver-wrapped candy. The same candy they had eaten. Lily picked it up, her hand trembling. "This is it." Suddenly, the door creaked open, just like it had on Halloween night. Inside, the house was pitch black. A cold gust of wind blew through the doorway, carrying with it the faintest scent of damp earth.
"Come closer."
The voice echoed from within. Sarah grabbed Lily's arm. "Let's go," she whispered, her voice shaking. But Lily couldn't move. She was frozen in place, her eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the door. The voice came again, louder this time.
Come closer.
And then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. Part 4. The Source of the Curse. The figure stepped out of the darkness, its movements slow and deliberate. Lily and Sarah backed away, their hearts pounding in their chests. It was a woman, tall and thin, with long grey hair that hung in tangled strands around her face. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes, cold and dark, glimmered in the faint moonlight. She smiled, revealing a row of sharp, yellowed teeth. "Did you enjoy the candy?" she asked, her voice a raspy whisper. Lily's breath hitched. What is this? Who are you?" The woman's smile widened. "I am the one who watches, the one who waits. And you have eaten my gift." Lily's hands shook as she clutched the silver-wrapped candy. "Why are you doing this?" The woman's eyes gleamed with malice. "Because you were foolish enough to take what was not yours. The candy is cursed, a gateway to the world of nightmares. And now that you have eaten it, you are mine." Sarah gasped, grabbing Lily's arm. "We have to go." But before they could turn to run, the woman raised a hand. Instantly, the air around them grew heavy, and a powerful force rooted them in place. "You cannot leave," the woman hissed. "You belong to me now. Your dreams, your fears, your very souls, they are mine to control." Lily struggled against the invisible force, her heart racing. "No. We didn't know. We didn't." The woman cut her off with a sharp laugh. "It doesn't matter. You accepted the gift. And now you will face the consequences." The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and the shadows around them deepened. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, and from the darkness, Lily could hear the sound of something moving, something large and monstrous. Suddenly, the woman's face twisted into a grotesque grin. "Do you hear them? They're nightmares. They are coming for you." Lily's heart pounded in her chest as the sounds grew louder, closer. She could feel the ground shifting beneath her feet, as if something was crawling up from the depths of the earth. "We have to stop this," Sarah cried, her voice trembling with fear. "There has to be a way." Lily's mind raced. The woman had mentioned that the candy was cursed, a gateway to the nightmares. But if there was a way to open the gate, maybe there was a way to close it. "The candy!" Lily shouted. "Maybe if we get rid of the candy, the curse will end." Sarah's eyes widened. "But how? We can't just throw it away." Lily glanced around, her mind racing. They had to do something, anything, to break the curse. And then she remembered the fire pit in the backyard. "Follow me," she yelled, pulling Sarah with her as she ran toward the back of the house. The force holding them in place seemed to weaken, and they managed to break free, racing through the backyard. The woman's laughter echoed behind them, but they didn't look back. They reached the fire pit, and Lily quickly pulled out the cursed candy, throwing it into the flames. The silver wrapper caught fire instantly, the flames flaring bright as the candy melted away. For a moment, nothing happened. But then, the air around them shifted. The heavy, oppressive force lifted, and the ground stopped trembling. The sounds of the nightmares faded into the distance, and the dark shadows that had surrounded them slowly receded. Lily and Sarah stood frozen, their hearts still racing, as the fire crackled softly in the pit. "It's over," Sarah whispered, her voice shaking with relief. "We did it." But as they turned to leave, Lily felt a cold breath on the back of her neck. A voice, barely more than a whisper, echoed in her ear.
It will never be over.
Part 5. The Final Nightmare. The days following the encounter with the woman were a blur for Lily and Sarah. The cursed candy had been destroyed, and the nightmares that had plagued them seemed to fade, but the lingering sense of dread never left. At school, things had returned to normal. The other kids no longer spoke of strange dreams or mysterious injuries. It was as if the curse had never happened. But Lily knew better. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. Every night, when she closed her eyes, she could feel the woman watching her, lurking just beyond the edge of her dreams. And the whispering. It never stopped.
It will never be over.
One night, as Lily lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she heard a sound that sent chills down her spine. Tap, tap, tap. She sat up, her heart racing. The sound was coming from the window. Slowly she turned her head, her breath catching in her throat. Standing outside, in the shadows, was the woman. Her cold, dark eyes were fixed on Lily, and her bony fingers tapped against the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Lily's blood ran cold. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The woman's lips curled into a sinister smile.
You shouldn't have eaten it.
The nightmare wasn't over. It had only just begun.